Hi, everyone. Welcome to ECI's user conference. My name is Rachel Villa. A little quick introduction about myself. I have been in the industry for 13 years. Before coming to ECI 2 years ago, I worked for many different Texas REPs, always in ERCOT retail operations. So I've done pretty much anything that you can think of from billing, collections, enrollments, transactions, scheduling, you name it, I've done it. That being said, I'm excited to have the opportunity to present to you today ECI's enhanced Texas functionality and Utilibill. So let's go ahead and dive right in. Today, during a live demo, we're going to discuss a few of the following topics: enrollments, payment extensions, payment arrangements, and deferred payment plans, pledges, past due notices, disconnect, reconnect, and move outs, auto pay, system settings, transactions, and reporting. So let's go ahead and get into our live demo. All right. Very first thing I'm going to show today is enrollments. So this screen should look pretty much familiar to a lot of you that work in Utilibill on a daily basis. We have added a few different types of requests for enrollments in Utilibill that are Texas specific. So first and foremost, we have the enrollment request. This is standard throughout the entire platform, regardless of the market. But enrollment request is essentially serves as a switch request. We have move-in request here. As you see, as I select move-in request, it'll automatically populate to an ERCOT. The billing method will be market or bill ready. So this move-in request allows you to submit a transaction to the market for a move-in. And then we also have established CSA. So that's for your continuous service agreements. If you do participate in that, we do have the functionality within Utilibill to submit those CSA transactions to the market. Okay. Moving right along, I'm going to go ahead and pull up a customer here. I'm going to pick a ERCOT utility and status active. I'm going to select a customer that has a balance that is due, as we're going to work through some payment arrangement options in Utilibill, payment plan options. So here we are. First things first, I'm going to go through and showcase a payment extension. A payment extension can be submitted at the customer's billing level. So the extension will allow functionality to take this due date here and extend it to another due date. So customer calls in and they need a payment extension. You're able to do that by extending the due date. All you do is click this payment extension button. You can put in the date, so 2/4/2022, and then you will just hit update due date. This will then update that due date. I'm going to select that real quick. It asks you if you want a payment extension letter. Okay. And there comes a warning message here that says the due date should not exceed the system settings configured maximum days from invoice due date. So there are system settings in Utilibill where you can indicate exactly what your extension parameters are. We'll go over that whenever we get to the system settings in Utilibill in that part of the presentation. So just keep that in mind that that is configurable. Next item that I want to show is payments and charges. We'll go into that area in Utilibill. And there is an add payment plan button here. Under the plan type, there are two different plans that you could select from. There's a deferred payment plan and a payment arrangement. First, we'll go ahead and go through the payment arrangement, and then I'll show you deferred payment plan. So clicking on the payment arrangement, there's different options that you can select on how you want your arrangement to be. Recurring charges, minimum due, and then you can also put in key in the number of terms. So here it allows you to put in whatever term it is. So I'm going to go ahead and put in 2. It also gives you a start date. You can select this, preview the plan, go over with the customer. It splits out into 2 equal installments since I selected recurring charges here. Gives you your scheduled date, your amount, and then if all is great and good on the customer's end, you would hit create payment plan. That then prompts you that there is not a DMP notice found for this payment plan. So a disconnect notice hasn't gone out. And now it prompts you to print the DMP notice as this is a Texas PUC requirement. So what you would do there is go here, you'd hit print DMP notice. That'll create. You can send that to your print vendor or your customer. And then after that, and you've satisfied that action, you can now actually set up that payment plan. Okay. Now I'm going to go through and what I'm going to do is I'm going to show, well, also in the correspondence that shows that a disconnected payment arrangement was created and a disconnect notice was sent. Okay. So going back into that payments arrangements, that payment charges tab, you'll see now that there is a payment plan credit adjustment for that amount that you just set up. And now the AR balance that the customer owes is $0. All right. So it removes it from the amount that is due and allows them until that payment arrangement is satisfied for them to pay that payment arrangement. Going into the same area, I'm going to go ahead and close this payment plan. It asks if I'm sure I want to close it. I'm going to select OK. Again, that will then create a correspondence at the customer level. And then going in here at the payments and charges, you will see that that amount is now there since we closed out that payment plan arrangement. I'm going to go back to the add payment plan button. And where before I picked payment arrangement, I'm going to select deferred payment plan. It looks very much the same as the payment arrangement in terms of the fields that are on the screen. The only difference here to note is that where before this was a field that you could populate yourself by keying in a number, this actually gives you a drop down in the terms that you want to select for that deferred payment plan. So this is 1 through 3, and this is also configured at the system settings. How do you want your deferred payment plan to be offered? Do you want it to be up to 6 months, 10 months, what have you? In this case, there's only up to 3 month deferred payment plans allowed. So I'm going to go ahead and select 3 months here and select preview payment plan. So this gives you 3 equal installments with scheduled dates based off of that 156.84 that you're setting up that plan for. So here, if the customer, agrees, everything's good to go, you'll just similarly hit create payment plan. And this comes back with an indicator that do you want to submit a 650 switch hold request. So where payment arrangements, you don't have switch hold functionality, deferred payment plan does have that embedded, and that is something that you can also enable at the system settings level. So I'm going to go ahead and hit select OK here. So I do want to submit my switch hold. The switch hold prompt comes back. The switch hold request has been submitted to the market. We're good to go on that. There will be a correspondence that is logged. Deferred payment plan is created. And then similarly, when you look at the payments and charges tab, it shows that there's a $0 balance. It will also remove that DPP from the customer's balance until that plan is satisfied. Now, one thing here is that if you do submit a switch hold to the market and that's part of your system settings to do that, there is also system settings to remove the switch hold upon the fulfillment of that that deferred payment plan. All right. So I'm going to go into that payment plan and I'm going to remove the switch hold. So where you have the automatic removal of a switch hold that can be configured with the utility bill, you also have the ability to remove the switch hold ad hoc if needed for any purpose. So here's that button here that allows that extra flexibility if you wanted to remove it just on demand. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that switch hold. It's going to tell me that it's successfully sent the switch hold removal. And then I'm going to close that payment plan. All right, I'm going to hit select OK here. And then going back here, you can see that the payments now, the balance for this customer has been updated to 156.84. So we're as we were beforehand. All right. Correspondence again will then log that the deferred payment plan has been closed. So that's basically in a nutshell, payment arrangements and deferred payment plans start to finish how they work throughout the customer's life cycle. Right. Going back to this payments and charges tab within utility bill, I am going to show you now how you can do a pledge payment. So if you get a pledge to pay, let's just say from Salvation Army, a customer indicates that they have a pledge promise of $100. You can set up that pledge and you'll go here and you'll hit pledge. You can put in that date. So 2/4/2022, let's just say pledge amount, Salvation Army. All right. And then the transaction code and the comments are not needed. So you can just post here. It's going to show that the pledge posted successfully. All right. So now when you get the physical check in for this customer for that $100 that was a pledge promise, you can click here into that under the payments and charges tab, same tab that we've been in, and you can select pay. So this is when you actually physically want to create the payment transaction. So let's just say you got it on 2/5/22, the amount's for $100. You'll post that payment. It's going to create that pledge payment. And then going back to that payments and charges area, it'll show exactly what the events that occurred. So you've got at first your agency pledge promise, which is what you posted, what you created, and then also your payment. So it's going to create an offsetting debit here. when the agency pledge has been paid, and then it will create that payment transaction that you keyed in. All right. So that, in a nutshell, is your payment arrangements, your extensions, your deferred payment plans, and your pledge payments. Moving on to our next item here is the past due notices. So under the billing tab, billing option in utility bill, there is a notices piece. Now, this notices here, there are three different notice levels that utility bill allows for, which are the reminder, the warning, and the disconnect. Now, not all three of these notice levels are required. It's completely up to you how you want to reach out to your customers in terms of what their notices are or where they're at in their collections process. These are here for you, but the one that is mandated by the Texas PUC is the disconnect notice. So I'm going to go ahead and select all of these just as an example. Go ahead and do all of my due dates, and then let's go ahead and view everything. So, where the past due notices come into play, there are a few different criteria here on the screen that it serves as an auditing tool, as the notices are not automatic through the system. You actually have to have a physical person go through, review this queue, review who's there, and select the customers. And then send out the notices. So some things that help the user pretty much guide through this process of who should get it is this disconnect note do not disconnect reason, D&D reason, and the expiration date. Additionally, there's a customer assist here. So perhaps you don't want to send out a notice to someone that has a pledge promise or a contract dispute. Again, 100% up to you. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. You would basically be able to go in here. You'd select who qualifies, and then you could log the correspondence, which will go to the customer's correspondence in Utilibill. And then if you are signed up to have a customer portal with configured to Utilibill, you could also log that said notice in that portal. So here you would go and basically select from who should receive that. You would print the notice. All right. And then that would end up creating a file that you could then create. You could then download and export to a print vendor or send out in house, whichever your process is. All right. So one thing here is that when you send a past due notice and it's the disconnect notice, that creates the timeline that begins in Utilibill on when a customer actually qualifies for a disconnect transaction. So again, that's can be configured at the system settings level. We'll show you that when we get there. But that will basically, once that notice is filled and sent out, that will then start the timeline of events of when a customer actually qualifies based off your system settings. So to actually send a disconnect transaction there in the same area, the billing section, there is a disconnect reconnect queue. So this disconnect reconnect queue looks very, very similar to the notices queue. Same thing with the notices, as you have to actually go in and physically select who should receive the notice and when. Disconnects are the same way. You still have a lot of the same fields like the customer assist and the do not disconnect reasons and the expiration date to kind of prompt you and guide you along best practices. You can then select who you want to receive a disconnect notice or a disconnect transaction. You could select them, right? You can select if you want to apply a fee, and then you can send that disconnect notice right or that disconnect transaction to the market right here. All right. All right. So then that will automatically send that disconnect notice out to them or the disconnect transaction out to the market. Now, where the next step in the process is the reconnect piece for payment, the reconnect for payment. So, where the disconnect, you actually have to go in and select who gets the disconnect transaction sent out and gets disconnected. Reconnects can be automated and enabled at the system settings level. Maybe you set a threshold where you want to be able to reconnect customers that pay within $20 of the fee that or the disconnect amount at the residential level. There's a lot of different flexibility on how you set up those automatic reconnects. If you don't want to put a reconnect on autopilot, you would then select from here and then send your reconnect. If it's disconnected and you submit this button, it'll know that a reconnect needs to go out. And then additionally, last piece of the puzzle in the process is selecting from the same queue and sending a move out for customers that were disconnected and did not pay their payment and you want to move them out for this connection. All right. So this is a queue where you'll manage that entire process from start to finish. The next item that I want to talk and touch on is auto pay. So in same billing area, there is automatic payments. Okay. So this here allows you to manage your auto pays. There's two different modes that I do want to point out. There's an auto pay mode, and then there's a manual mode. They can also be found up here at the top, and they mean exactly what it looks like. If it's auto pay, that means that all of the authorizations have been selected and they're good to go, and a schedule has been created for this to be on autopilot. So that's a good, satisfied 100% start to finish auto pay, a actual auto pay that you do not have to think about or manage from this queue. You also have other customers that will be in a manual setting. So these customers here, they may have put in their auto pay information, their credit card information, but maybe they didn't select all of the authorizations that actually physically sign them up on autopilot. So if that is the case and a customer put in their credit card information and just didn't complete that final step of the process, you could run this report, look at this tool every day, select those that, based off of criteria when their invoice is due and their due date and their due amount, you could pick who you want to select, and then you would be able to submit the payment from this queue. All right. Next thing that we're going to cover is system settings. So we've been talking about this throughout the entire presentation, and this is probably what I think sets Utility apart from most billing softwares that I've worked with in the past, is that we allow a lot of flexibility within the system settings to basically run your own bus and operate based off your own rules and how you want to handle and operate. So, whereas some other softwares might say, oh, okay, you can only disconnect customers after this many days and reconnect after this many days for this amount and that type of thing. And there's a lot of manual interventions if anything. The system settings in Utilibill really allows you the flexibility to say what you want to do and when, and then establish that for your operating practice. The very first tab that I want to go over in the system settings is the invoices tab. So, first thing to highlight is the assess late charges. There are two different methods. You have a standard here, and then where you can set the rate, or for ERCOT marketers specifically, there is a Texas PUC compliance. So, as you guys know, there's a lot of compliance standards around exactly how and when and who to assess late charges to. So, in a nutshell, if you just pick Texas PUC compliance, you're covered. There's no need to think about it, nothing like that. Another item here under the invoices tab is invoice with no TDSP charges. There's different levels. You can set it up as a stop. So what this means is that if you get usage 867, but you don't have the corresponding 810 for that billing cycle, it will stop at the billing register. Otherwise, whenever you do get both counterparts 867, 810, and it's a complete billing component, you can then bill it out and it will no longer have that stop sign to kind of prompt you that there's a piece missing before you can bill. All right, disconnect and reconnect. So this is very fancy. Where I was showing you in the notices, the past due notices queue, there were three levels: reminder, warning, and disconnect. You can enable these, you can disable them. This, of course, disconnect notice is the mandated piece, but if you wanted to do a reminder and warning notice, those are there for you too in the platform. So where this says -5, that means 5 days before the due date, 1 day before the due date, and then this generate disconnect notices will be 1 day after the due date. So that's kind of how that reads there. Deferred payment plans, where we were talking through setting up the deferred payment plan in Utilibill, we only had an option up to 3. That is because it's configured that way in Utilibill. This is again, maybe you want to do 6 as a standard operating procedure, up to you, but that gives you the flexibility to say how you want those DPPs to be set up and what the term limit is. Then here comes the switch hold piece. So I have it enabled here in system settings to send a switch hold upon the creation of the DPP. Again, you can either have that set up or not. And then also I have the other part to that. Send an automated switch hold removal upon the fulfillment of the DPP. So that will pretty much automate the sending of the switch hold and the release upon the fulfillment. All right. Then we have some disconnect and reconnect settings here. What are our disconnect days, our reconnect window, our move out days, so on and so forth. And do I want to charge a disconnect fee? And what are they? And when do I do that? Upon a completed response or the request, so on and so forth. Do I want to enable the auto reconnect? Okay. So where I said disconnects, that's 100% something that you have to manage on your end. You have the ability to do the auto reconnect based off of automatic reconnect thresholds here. So you can set up based off of percentage of balance or the remaining balance. So let's just say I wanted to hit remaining balance. And we have commercial and residential here. So where I have $50 as the remaining balance for residential, if a customer is disconnected for $100 and pays 50 of that $100, once that's in utility bill, that reconnect will then go through and the customer will be reconnected because it's on auto reconnect. All right. Last but not least, one thing I want to show here in the system settings is the CSA settings. So if you are participating in the continuous service agreements, then the CSA settings is something that is there for you to indicate how you want your marketer account number generation policy to be, if you have a preference, and then also if you have a bill cycle for those CSAs. So do you want a monthly, bi-monthly, so on and so forth. Okay. All right, so that is your system settings, a highlight reel of those. Let's go into a customer. Now, the next topic I'm going to show is some transactions that you can submit that are ERCOT centric. So, going into a customer's account here at the Actions tab, you have multiple different drop downs and things that you can select from. Very first thing that we're going to go through is the process service order request. So, any 650s that you can think of that you wanted to send out ad hoc, you have your disconnect, your meter exchanges, your meter tests, your reconnects, and your switch holds. You can submit those all from this screen. All right, at the customer level. The next thing we have is a move out request. The move out request, you can, customer calls in, they want to move out, you can put the effective date of that move out. And then also, if they did want to de energize their location, you could also submit for a remove meter here as well. Next is your cancel drop request. So this cancel drop request will cancel any switch requests, move-in requests, or move-out requests. All you have to do is simply populate the original tracking number of whatever you're trying to cancel and then submit it from this area. And that will then effectively cancel that tracking number. All right. So then we have the drop date change request. So anything that you want to change a date in, whether it's a move in, switch, drop, what have you, again, similar as the last transaction, you would just populate the original tracking number that you're trying to change, and then you would hit submit. All right. CSA delete request and CSA establishment. That is here at the special actions tab as well. If you're in the continuing service agreement space and this is something that you are actively doing, there is functionality to send those established and delete requests from utility bill under special actions. All right. And then we also have a transfer of service. So whenever you select transfer of service, it gives you a screen that helps you pre-populate, the location of the current Easy ID, your move out date, and then you can put the new utility account number or Easy ID, what that move in date is, and then what you can populate your contract details. You want to include the ETF. So there's a lot of information here to really make it easy for you to transfer service with very little input and kind of automate the process from a user interface. Then you would just hit save and submit, and you're good to go. Last but not least, before we conclude today's presentation, I just want to talk about reports. So under tools and reports, we have several different reports that are Texas focused and geared. I think there's about over 15. And the one that I actually want to highlight today during this demo is the ERCOT contract expiration report. So the ERCOT transaction residential contract expiration letters is something that we put into utility bill just recently following the 2021 Uri winter freeze storm. There was a House Bill 16 legislation that was passed regarding ERCOT marketers with residential customers, fixed residential customers that needed to be contracted and noticed. So this kind of gives you a guide on what that schedule is based off of the legislation that was passed. And so you can pretty much send your contract expiration letters in a schedule based off those requirements by using this queue. It'll pull up anyone that has a fixed contract that needs to be noticed. It'll kind of tell you when the notice is due, what notice level is due, one, two, or three, depending on their term, and then also what that schedule notice level is and that date is. You could then from here select what you're looking for, and then you would print your letters, and then you would satisfy that and would go to the next level of scheduling. So that is the one report that I wanted to highlight since that is new and it's very driven towards what the legislation was passed. And with that being said, I think we've covered all of the topics for ECI Enhanced Texas Functionality. And I hope you all have a great rest of your user conference here. And I'm really, happy to get to know all of you. Thank you.